The following video has been created without the use of AI. Please support your human content creators by liking the video and commenting something down below. Subscribing is optional. Now please, enjoy the show. Sebastian stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror intently, looking out for any movement, but the neutral bioluminescence of them made it difficult to see anything of value. It had been a few days since he realized he had been infected by X3232, a parasitic, barely visible by the eye insect in the shape of an octopus paralarvae. Since that day, he occasionally checked his eyes for movement. His little monstrosity sucked blood from his retinal artery. Because the thing was so small, any damage was repaired by his body almost immediately, giving it free rein over any place in his body. And so, really only during the few moments his vision became almost unnoticeably blurry, he knew the thing was feeding on him. He felt gross every time it happened. And the thought of it just freely swimming and squirming inside of him, well, he felt violated. Since then, he had used his time awake to figure out ways to get rid of it. His current plan had been taking a bunch of fever-inducing pills that Urban Shade had developed specifically to cook parasites, and yet, despite his profuse sweating and racing heartbeat, he saw it move. It was still alive. Annoyed, he slammed his fist on the sink in front of him. He was suffering for nothing. The only upside about this situation was the fact that there hadn't been any fatalities related to X3232 infections. Sighing, Sebastian leaned against the wall. It was wonderfully cool against his hot body. The pills were overheating his body. Crap. He pulled at his scarf until it loosely hung around his chest. He was wiping through his wet, sweaty hair. Didn't think fish could sweat, he complained out loud. Sebastian leaned over to the automatic entrance door, quickly swiping his override keycard, locking the door effectively. Sighing, he stared before removing his jacket, shirt, and anything else that covered his body. And now he could quite literally see the sweat oozing out from under his scales. It was a little pathetic, really, but he lay down on the cold, tiled floor, spreading himself out as much as he could. Stupid pills. He might have just swallowed some placebo sugar pills for all the good that it did him. And he was getting woozy. The light shining into his eyes from the aggressive neon tubes was becoming stronger. And so he placed an arm on his face. When suddenly, out of nowhere, the floor began to feel different. In fact, it felt as if he was sinking. He grunted. The heat was becoming unbearable. He rolled around only to realize that the ground was giving way to his weight. In fact, it quite literally moved through his fingers. Wait a second. Was that sand? Immediately he was wide awake as he stared down the brown grains beneath him. His hands placed on the sand, he felt how his weight pushed against the soft material. And he stood up. No longer was he a sea serpent mutant monster, but a man. He had somehow turned back to being a human. Yeah, no. Sebastian rubbed his forehead. Right, he thought. X3232 created vivid lucid dreams that were quite pleasant. So this was more than likely a dream. Well, it most definitely was a dream. Standing up, he looked around. An infinite desert spread out before him. A scorching breeze brushed over the endless wavy dunes. His long black hair was knotted into a ponytail, and he was dressed only in a grey loincloth. A weird feeling, really, as he felt the air brush against his barely protected groin. The sweltering heat, though, was almost unbearable, and it was difficult to breathe. This was kind of the opposite of a pleasant dream, or perhaps the dreamer was reacting to the state of his body. His gaze moved over the horizon. If it wasn't for the wind, there would be nothing but perfect silence. It was almost eerie. Liminal would be the word. Gulping, he looked towards the sky. The sun was the same clinical white as the neon lamps of the bathroom. Well, it wasn't the first time he had fallen asleep in one. At least this time, he hoped at least, no one would draw free use with a permanent mark on his face with an arrow pointing at his mouth. To this day, he had no idea which one of the guys in his university frat had drawn it on him, and more than likely, he would never find out. Slowly he began to descend the dune he found himself on, realizing that walking felt quite normal. He was sure by now he had forgotten how to keep balance, thanks to having switched things up to slithering motions rather than one step at a time. Suspiciously his eyes narrowed. This wasn't the first time a dream had turned him into a human, it seems. He looked left and right. He must have had dreams like this since the day he got infected. No, hang on. He had nightmares a while ago. There was a specific day. He rubbed his eyes and thought. Hang on. There had been a distinct time period where all his dreams were just black screens to him, and yet he always awoke satisfied. A feeling similar to that of having just laid the pie. He blushed and rubbed over his shoulders at the thought. Nah, there was no way. Was it? Gulping, he ascended the next dune, but the loose sand made it difficult. Thankfully, he was alone, so no one saw him ascended on all fours. And upon reaching the summit, he once again gave the area a quick gaze around. Sweat was running down his body from the heat, and some got into his eye. It burned. Annoyed, he rubbed over his face. And then he saw it. In the distance was something that looked a little different. It had color other than brown. It was a ring of greenery poking out of the sandy void. Trees. That meant water. Water meant cooling down. And as quickly as he could, without actually tiring out his body, as not fall into its adaptation to breathe out of his mouth, he trotted forward. And as he reached the border of the oasis, however, his body finally gave up. He fell forward, face planting into the sand. The only mercy, the shadow of the first tree that just barely covered the upper half of his back. Sebastian was vaguely aware of the things happening to him, but his ears twitched at the sound of naked feet hitting the sand. Someone was humming as they came closer. He could roughly tell that they stopped next to him. Barely mentally there, he could feel his arm be raised and almost painfully be dragged through the sand, which was becoming cooler the further he was pulled. Whoever decided to save him placed him against a tree. Sebastian could feel the rough bark of a palm tree push against the skin of his back. And moments later, cool water was splashed at his face. He shook up, his heart beating faster. Looking at his hands, he realized he was still in the dream. And just past his fingers, he saw a pair of peachy legs. And as he looked up, he was met by the face of a beautiful woman, looking at him with uttermost curiosity. And truth be told, his eyes almost jumped out of their sockets. Your beauty was breathtaking. Not to mention what you're wearing, or more, lack thereof.
Are you feeling okay, my host?
You asked in a gentle voice. Sebastian's face turned red, and you could feel his own body's heat reaching the same level as the outside desert. Host, you say? So you are... You smiled and poked his nose with a finger.
Yes, host. I am what you call 3232.
He gulped down a big bowl of spittle. Your body had gentle curves, with hip-long blonde hair that in the sweltering sun almost looked like strings made from pure polished gold. Your knife-shaped ears and your eyes... You had nice-shaped ears, and your eyes were as beautiful as the sky above. But most of all, you're only dressed with a few amulets around your neck, a golden armlet that snaked around your skin, squeezing your flesh just right to create the tiniest of bumps, and 2 golden bands with red beads hung around your ankles. An Ankh symbol was painted under your right eye, giving you the seductive image of an Egyptian goddess. Or, well, a more Asian-inspired image, as your skin was peach-colored. And it appeared to be sinfully soft. Your body was perfectly shaven too, only your head had any hairs growing on it. And your fingernails were just long enough to leave behind marks without being inconvenient, should you decide to scratch him.
Host?
He asked carefully. So, are all dreams like this? He asked cautiously. And you smiled coyly. Strangely enough, he felt a certain kinship with you. Yeah. His body was reacting to you. This was all he needed to confirm his doubts. This definitely wasn't the first time he met you.
Well, the first time we ended up together, it was a beautiful little meadow with a little creek.
He blinked. It was hard to concentrate when 2 beautiful orbs were bouncing with every movement you made just above his nose as you spoke. You smiled seductively at him.
I was wondering when you'd show up, host.
You bit your lower lip and then snickered.
I do wonder if other hosts are as insatiable as you.
He exhaled through his mouth. Well, I am thirsty. He finally croaked. Smiling at your beloved host, you stepped aside.
Oh, please, do enjoy,
he said, pointing at the oasis. Bright blue water silently stood there. Clean. Looking so perfect it was almost scary. But as he tried to stand up, he fell back against the tree.
Oh, my host, allow me to help you, please, you purred. Gently, you propped him up against you, his arm draped around your shoulder. You awkwardly made the few steps to the watering hole. But I must ask, my beloved host, you said as you waded into the cold liquid. And Sebastian sighed. Why is it that you have suddenly become so hot? I was worried you might die from it. He didn't answer until he was waist deep. His entire body shivered in delight. Using his hands, he drank a handful of the dream water. It was an expected taste, just like regular mineral water. Sighing as the coolness flooded his insides, he turned to face you. And like a water nymph, your upper half was standing out of the liquid. He shook his head for a moment, and then finally answered. I don't remember these dreams. I don't remember you, he said, and admitted. God, you were a distraction to all his senses. Curiously, you tilted your head. My awake self wants to get rid of you. You gasped, placing a hand on your mouth. But I've done nothing but serve you these past... He raised a hand to shut you up. No. Think of awake me as a different person. Concerned, you tilted your head. I have no memories when I wake up. All I know when I do is that whatever happened while I was asleep, I enjoyed. Your eyes filled with tears. But I suppose my wake me doesn't know what your... He was interrupted by you jolting forward. Your arms wrapped around him, your wet body nestling against him. It felt like you were melting into his body, almost... And for a moment, Sebastian forgot to breathe. You enjoy my company, host? With big puppy eyes, you stared up at him. You do? Confused, he looked down at you. His mind was unable to fully work through the image before him. And that's when your eyes twitched, and you looked down, curiously tilting your head while he blushed even harder. So far he could contain himself, but with you shoved against him so tightly, a cat-like smirk appeared on your lips, your elf ears twitching adorably. I mean, you aren't lying, host. I can tell. You just don't understand how happy that makes me. Sebastian placed a shaking hand on your cheek, gently brushing against your skin. So you're really really into this, huh? In what way, my host? This adorable submissive thing. It's like you're worshipping me. Your face buried into his chest, rubbing against him lovingly before you responded. How can I not worship you, my lovely host? You're quite literally my world, my reason I live. Well, that made sense at least. So what about the desert, 3232? He finally asked after basking your touches for a few minutes. I don't have 100% influence of the worlds our minds create. If I wanted to, I'd need to become more invasive, and I wouldn't want to harm you. To control a host's dream, your species injected a venom into the infectee's brain to lower their mental defenses, to allow for a stronger psychic link. However, if the dosage was too high, it would lead to quite literally brain rot, as all the psychic stress from the surrounding world would now suddenly be able to damage the brain. Sebastian thought for a moment. So his theory was correct. The desert was here because of his self-induced fever. A jolt went through Sebastian's body as you brushed against his groin. "Oh, my host, I know what you desire," you whispered into his ear, and he smiled. "Well, I suppose there's no point in further denying it, huh?" He smiled. And then you kissed him. His lips were soft and gentle. From what you knew about him and what had happened to him, a good man had been sacrificed for the experimentation. He would have made a human woman very happy one day, but alas, that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. And at least you could partake in the pleasure of the flesh with him this way. His hands rubbed over your back, slick from the water, as he began to slowly push you towards the water's edge, until he pressed your back into the soft sand. He was pinning you down, your wrists held up, his legs secured around your hips. Not that you were fighting him. He relished in the dominance he had over you. As warm water dripped from his body, glistening in the sunlight, each droplet like a shining pearl. His lips returned. He used the muscled strength of his mouth to pry open your own, to allow his tongue access to the soft walls of your huffing, grunting self. He invaded your body and knew what it wanted, twitching and wiggling aggressively, needy inside you. His heart beat faster, and Sebastian lowered his body, putting his entire weight on you, making you moan. And that's when he removed his face from yours, grinning down at you with the pleased smugness of someone about to And that's when he removed his face from yours, grinning down at you with pleased smugness. You looked up at him with the innocence of a creature that didn't know the meaning of unconditional love, but didn't need to know it to express it. His hands went down from your wrists, sliding down until they reached your hip. In the same motion, he pulled himself back, positioning himself anew between your legs. Your hands now free, you reach for his shoulders. "Are you ready?" He purred.
Hey, you watched the video until the very end. That's very kind of you. But before I say goodbye, I have to shout out all of my lovely channel members, especially my high-ranking darling stewards, who get a members-only video every month. Join the tier for just $4.99. Anyways, we have Nicolai Hatcher, Maxi Cat, Alison Watkins, Bella Mare, Mystic Jade 111, Giovanna Moretti, Twilight Mia, Angry Boxman, Hella, Anonymous Weep, and Nicodemus D. Thank you for supporting me. Also, thank you to everybody else who is supporting me. You are keeping me alive.